Hi, this is something I've wanted to do for all of you generations that come after me. I'm going to show you some pictures, I'm going to try and explain them, and then you've got a record of who your ancestors are. So the first picture is of my grandmother and at her wedding. And she was Minnie Johnson, and my grandfather's name was John Rhodes. And so one side is the Johnsons and the other side is the Rhodes. I don't know them all. So that was them getting married. Now this is a younger picture of my mother, and she was a Rhodes and she became Powell when she married my father. So this is a very early picture of her. And now this is a picture of Grandma and Grandpa Powell, my grandparents. They lived in Birmingham, England, and he was very wealthy and so was she. She came from a family called Blanche. Chance was her name, Chance, and they were the originators of Chance Glass, and it became Pilkington Glass, which was a very big organisation out near Wigan. So they were very wealthy. Now, my father and mother married. This is their wedding. And because it's wartime, they didn't wear white, they just got married, people did in those days, or they did. And what it was, when my father met my mother, he was about 32 and he'd been quite a rogue. He'd been sort of the younger one of the family, and his father said if he didn't settle down, that was going to be it. So he did. He settled down and he ran a factory. One of the factories of my grandfather's, and it was in Oldham, and it was called Anchor Chain Company. And when my father got older, he sold to Reynolds Chains, which is a big company again. So they were married. Then they had my brother, which this is an older picture of my brother, and he was in the Merchant Navy. He went to boarding school. He went to what was called Ellesmere College, very big boarding school in England, the sort of place that people became ministers and parliamentary people. He didn't, but he joined the Navy, the Merchant Navy. This is me when I was young. My mother said I wasn't as pretty as my brother. I wasn't there to acknowledge that, but my grandmother said, oh yes, she's pretty. So this is my brother, Ian, and myself when we lived in a place called Chadderton, near Oldham. We were both born in Oldham, and he went to boarding school when he was 9, and then I went to boarding school when I was 9, which for a woman, it's a big mistake because you have no domestic training whatsoever. It's all written in a book, and I'll tell you about the shock of that later. So this is a picture of my mother later on. I think this is a picture when she became lady captain of a golf club in Ainsdale called Royal Birkdale, and it's where they have the big golf tournaments. So it's all very interesting, I hope. This is my brother with his wife, Joan. They were very happily married. They never had children, but they had a great life. Unfortunately, my brother died of melanoma cancer when he was 60, which was very sad. And yeah, so that was that. Now this is a picture of my dad, my father. His name was Arthur Edward Powell, but they called him Ted. And he was a businessman. He lived and worked for his business. In fact, that's what killed him. He had a coronary thrombosis. And yeah, it was very sad. He died at, I think he was 60 when he died. Oh, that's a picture of the both of them, my mother and my father, at Niagara Falls. They came for a holiday to Niagara Falls. And this is a picture of my brother and myself at a wedding. This is going, we're getting closer now to real time. That was my cousin's wedding. And this is another one of my sister-in-law and my brother, Ian and Joan. Yeah, this is one I thought I'd put in. It was when I was ordained as a minister. I've just put the one picture in, but my middle son was there, and it was an amazing time, and it was so of God that I got ordained. I became a Christian when I was 40. Before that, I didn't know if God really did exist or not. But at 40, I had a time in my bedroom when I felt totally convicted that my life before God was wrong and I needed to get right with God. And He just came into my life and changed it. And I wanted you to know that, because in the early days, I remember my grandmother, she sang in the choir of a Methodist church, and she used to take me with her. And that really was the only time I saw church. But it obviously did make a mark on me. So now I have some pictures of my son's weddings. This is Paul, the eldest, and he was married in England, but he married to a German girl, Andrea. And they lived in Germany and had 2 boys, Sebastian and Ben. And now Ben has a little girl. She's called Lily, who is now 15 years old. And Sebastian has a little girl, and she's 2. So they're all in Germany. Now this is me with my youngest son. I think today we call them a whoops. But he's so gorgeous. This is Robin, and his mum lives in Sweden. So he's the Swedish branch. Now this is my son Julian. He is married to a Scottish girl, and they live in Scotland, and they have 4 children, and 2 of those children are married, and the children are called Jason, Naomi, Emma and Andrew. Emma just got married and she's having a baby, and Naomi has a little boy called Travis, and Jason is married but not got children at this point. This is Matthew, the youngest. I didn't feel that I'd really shown him much before, but he's the one who lives out here in Canada, and he is the one that I think the breakup of my marriage and the way of life that seemed to have affected him more than anybody. But I just loved each one of my boys. I have to say that when each one of them was born, I had a different emotion. My first Paul, when he was born in 1960, I felt so grateful to have him, so grateful that he was there. My second one, Julian, I felt peace. He was the most peaceful birth I could have possibly had, and I just felt peace about him and my relationship. With Matthew, he didn't seem to want to come into the world. He had, we had to have this where they bring you on, and he still didn't come. I said, but when he came, I felt he was my friend. A little tiny baby there, and I just thought, oh my goodness, you're just my little friend. And if I hadn't had the 3 boys when I went through all the operations and everything I had, I wouldn't be here today. They were my reason for living, and I just love them to bits. I think they're beautiful boys, and that's something I want to leave behind, to let them know they're loved. And even though they're miles away in different parts, I'm happy for them. And if I'm happy for them, that means that I don't resent that they moved away. This is another picture, a humorous picture of my mother. We called it Her Boyfriend and Her. It really is it isn't really. We were just in a park and we took a picture of her. But she had a great sense of humour. She was 84 when she died. And yeah, she was quite a woman. Now, where are we? Who haven't I? Oh, this is Julian, my middle son. Before I came to live in Canada, which was in 2004, I was at 60 and he was 30. So we had a party together. And this is at that party. Yes, I came out to Canada in 2004. Never, ever thought I'd be coming to Canada. Now, this is a picture that was taken at my son's 40th. And this is basically all the Crispins, because I was married to begin with to my son's father, who was Colin Crispin. And we were married in England. But I don't have any pictures of the marriage because it was in December and it was foggy. And none of the pictures came out. But this is the whole Crispin family that got together. I'm in there because although I went back to the name of Powell, oh no, I was actually a tailor at that point because I had married this man. This is my Canadian husband that I married in 2006. We were married for 5 years and he got very ill. But he was a lovely man and I was glad to be married to him. So, yep, we're coming to it now. That's that picture. This is my eldest son with my great-granddaughter, Lily. She must have been visiting. But yeah, they all still live in the countries where they were married. I think that's all the pictures. So it kind of brings me up to date. My son here is married to Jackie. She is half First Nations and they married about 20 years ago. They've got a daughter, Jade, and a son, Ian. Ian was called after my brother. But just before he died, he knew he was having a son, and so he called him Ian. Now, my granddaughter Jade has 2 daughters, very young babies, Evelyn and Liliana. And I don't have a picture of their wedding. I wasn't actually at their wedding, but yeah. So now I am in my 70s when I take this. I am now 73. And I hope that I've been able to keep some of the history of our family in this recording.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, right. Well, I was born to the Edna and Ted Powell in Oldham. I lived in a place called Chadderton. And when I was 9, I went to boarding school. I didn't realise, I thought it was the natural thing to do. People who had money sent their kids to do boarding school. It was only when really I met my husband-to-be, I was 17. Oh no, I wasn't. I was 15. And we married when I was 17. I was pregnant at the time, which was a big shock. I thought it happened to other people, not me. And I was encouraged to maybe get the baby adopted, but I couldn't do it. And I'm just so glad I never did. I would have always wondered where he was. So my parents agreed that we should marry. And he bought us a house, furnished it, and we had everything we needed. And it didn't rest well with my husband. I think he felt like he'd been bought. But we stayed together and we had 2 more children. But the whole point was, when I first got married, I didn't know how to cook, I didn't know how to clean, and I'd never held a baby. So for me, this was horrendous. Where he'd come from a different walk of life and wanted his meal on the table, wanted the house clean, and wanted so, and it was so hard for me. My mother sent her cleaning lady up to teach me how to clean, and I always joke that when we went in the bathroom, she was trying to teach me how to clean the toilet, and I said, I clean the toilet? I have to do that? So yes, life began with a big bump once I came out of my family setting and into marriage. And I'd been used to being in a boarding school and fending for myself. Boarding school that I went to wasn't quite like the one my brother went to, where they all came out as gentlemen. We came out like Trinians. St. Trinians was a school where everybody rebelled. But the one thing that really was wonderful about the school I went to, the boarding school in Shropshire, called Tunstall Hall, and we had a musical ride, which was on horses, and I was allowed to have my own horse there. So life was amazing, really. And we'd practice every night with a banner, and we'd have, a uniform. One year the Mounties would come to the showgrounds and do their thing. The next year we would be asked to go. And it was an amazing experience, it really was. And that was all I knew, was how to look after a horse and feed it and make it look good and ride it well. I won the Challenge Cup for the year at the school. So I really came out of there quite tough. I was quite, nobody messed with me. And then I felt very lonely when I came out of boarding school. I'd be about 13. And I ended up going to a convent in the town, because I didn't know anybody when I came home. So I went to the convent and I learned how to skip school. I learned how to sign my name in and then go to the swimming pool, which my mother totally objected to. They were paying money, good money, for me to go to the swimming pool. So she got me a job with her hairdresser. I hadn't even a clue that I wanted to do hairdressing. It wasn't something I'd sort of dreamed of. So I left school at 15 and I started a hairdressing apprenticeship, which was a long apprenticeship in those days. You did 3 years as an apprentice and 2 years as an improver. The first year you had to go to college and learn first year nursing. So it was very intense, and really my school life was horses. We majored on it. The school I was in majored on horses. So my actual education was not too good. So I got by, and it was around about this time that my first husband came into my life, and we met and started dating. I'd be about 15. And then we sort of, we went out together and life was good. But then that was just for 10 years. We were married for 10 years and I didn't have a good time. I wasn't very happy. He didn't understand me and I didn't understand him. So it was always at loggerheads. And after 3 children, I lost all my ability to converse even with people and to go in places with people. It was a bad time. And I felt that if I didn't get out, I would die. And so I left and I took the children and we went to my mother. My father had already died and she looked after the children, and I went out and had the teenage life I hadn't had. So life got very hectic, and it wasn't good, but it was a way of losing myself until, as I say, when that went on for a few years. We were homeless. My mother couldn't take the children. It was too much, 3 children, and she was a widow now and in her 70s, I think she'd be, and she asked us to leave, and so we ended up going. It was very hard. We ended up going from accommodation to accommodation, and sometimes I couldn't find accommodation that would take the children. So the children went into care, which was very hard for me. I felt as if part of me had disappeared, and found somewhere as quick as I could to get them back with me. Then I became very ill. I had about 4 operations, and to begin with, people looked after, my relatives looked after the children, the boys, but the second time I went in, they'd had enough, and so they ended up in care again, which I would never have wanted for them to do that, but there was nothing I could do. The father had remarried and lived down south, and yeah, it was a very sad time, and again kept moving, and the boys just, I used to take things with me that were common to us, statutes or, you know, bits of things to put in the place, so every time we went it felt like home. The eldest, Paul, when he left school, he tricked me kinda. He said he wanted to go in the army, and I said, well, I don't want you going in as cannon fodder. He said, no, I'm going to join the catering corps. Oh, okay. But he didn't. He joined the junior leader of the army. And then when he came out of there, he went in as just as a private. So he stayed in the army for about 12 years, and that's how he met his wife. My middle son, Julian, he became a Christian. I thought he'd joined a cult. I thought he'd gone off the wall. I thought I've lost him because I never saw him. He was always away. So I went up to the church and I said, what have you got here? My son's never home. He said, how do you mean? I said, and I told him. He said, I'll have a word with the youth leader. What happened was there was a lot of them. A lot of the people, young ones, had become Christians, and they were studying, all through the night they were studying the Bible. And I thought, oh my goodness, what has he joined? And I wasn't happy at all. He ended up moving out because of my persecution, I suppose. But then he came back in to work at home with me whilst I worked as a care assistant. Just 2 weeks at a time I'd go to people's houses. And I started to kind of like his music and that. And then I remember one night he was going away on the ship, the OM, the Logos, and he'd be away for 2 years. And he was saying goodbye to everybody, and that was the night, the Friday was the night that I just bore myself before God and asked for forgiveness, and would Jesus come into my life. So when my son came home, he said, are you okay? I said, no, I need to talk with you, something's happened. So he came up and I told him, and he said, oh Mum, let's pray. Well, I said, I couldn't remember how to pray. I didn't even remember the Lord's Prayer, but he prayed. And as he prayed with me, I saw tears drop from his eyes, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is a real melting moment. And he went on the ship, and I went to see him off, and so did my mum, and he had a different girlfriend at the time, and they bought me a Bible, and I put it in this bag, and my mother said, what have you got in that bag? And I said, it's a Bible. So she said, what do you want with a Bible? And I said, well, I became a Christian on Friday night. She said, you what? But the funny side of it is, when she was 70, she received Jesus into her life too. But he went away, he went on the ship, and that's where he met his wife, Vivian. And she was Scottish, so he went to live in Scotland. And then my youngest son, he joined the army, and he came out to Canada. And whilst he was in Canada with the British Army, he knew he wanted to come back here. And so by hook or by crook, he was going to get back here. And we had some friends in England, and they looked up some friends here, and they took him in. And so he met his wife, Jackie, and they got married and came out here to live. I couldn't understand how a British guy could come and live in Canada. Oh, how could you do that? Well, 2004, I did it. It took a long time. I worked, maybe you need to know. For how many years? After I became a Christian, I just felt so much changed in me. And coming from the sort of home I'd come from, going into the sort of marriage I'd gone into, God just put his heart on me, and I started to get empathy for homeless people, and became very well known in my hometown of Southport as the one who put on Christmas shelters for the homeless. And then I felt to start a company, a charitable company called The Way. And I ran that for 6 years, where we helped people find accommodation. We had thrift stores, we call them charity shops in England, and help people with who are drug addicts or who were just couldn't find accommodation for one reason or another. Some of the guys, they would be great, they would stay in their accommodation. The problem was they would invite everybody else in, and so they ended up homeless again. So it was an ongoing work. And then we opened up a halfway house. There's so many stories involved with incidences with the homeless that it was a 24/7 job. But it was a calling as well. And it was during that time that I became ordained as a minister. Not to work in a church, but to work in the marketplace and to further the work of the Way. Then I think it all got very hard on me, and I gave it over to the first guy who helped run it to begin with. And I went to work for Teen Challenge in Wales, Llanelli. You have to say the two L's with a cl. Llanelli. And I worked for them for 2 years, but I'd already put in an application to come to Canada. And as I say, I worked there for a year. I just loved being with these girls. They would come in looking so haggard and old and, really in a bad way. And within a month, they just blossomed into beautiful girls. And we just helped them. It was very strict, but it was very, very rewarding. Then I moved to Scotland because I'd never heard from anybody in Canada that I could move. So it took 3.5 years to get out here. And I lived in Scotland for 2 years. And then from Scotland, moved out here. Yeah.
Excellent. Have you done any other traveling around the world?
Well, not really. No, not really. When I lived in England, it was so easy to go to Spain, and on that continent, and France and Italy. I've been to the Bahamas. I have a timeshare in Fort Lauderdale, but nothing that far, no.
What's your earliest memory?
Ooh, my earliest memory? I don't know. It's really weird. It's like I looked at the pictures before I put them on, and I thought, gosh, yeah, that was me, as a child. I think I wasn't an easy child. I I don't know why. I was very demanding. I always wanted what I saw and screamed if I didn't get it. I can't believe that that was me. And I have no idea why, but I know I felt very secure, and I felt as if my father, no matter what, would always be there for me. He was the big guy in my life, and I could twist him around my little finger. I think that's what, being his daughter. Yeah. So
if you were speaking to your great grandkids 50 years from now, is there anything you'd like to say to them?
Oh, I can't imagine what they'd be like. The world's changing so quickly, and all so automated, everything, that I hope they come to know Jesus as their Lord and Saviour. That would be everything to me, that they would reach out and understand that there's a God who loves them. It's something I didn't understand. I thought he was a way off and unreachable, but he's not. He's close, and that's what I'd like for them. And I'd like them to be happy. And being happy doesn't mean being wealthy. It means being happy in who you are, where you've come from, who your parents are. Just be happy in who you are. I think that's a big thing. An internal happiness, not externally getting happiness. Yeah.
Are there any health conditions or anything like that that run in the family?
Well, I've had a lot of health problems. During my years from 16 to 27, it started with having my tonsils out. Then I had just operation after operation. I had a hysterectomy, I had a womb removed and the ovaries. I had a disc removed. I had gallbladder. They thought I had cancer, and when they opened me up, I didn't have cancer. So that's and then I had an abscess on my kidney, which meant I had another scar. But the genetic one that's come to light, which is now in 2017, is that I have what's called alpha-1 antitrypsin. And what it is, it's a gene that's missing from the lung, and the liver is compromised with lack of protein, and so it appears in me as asthma and COPD. This is something that I wondered why, when I got a cold, I went down with coughing and really bad as a youngster, and it was only diagnosed 2 years ago. Also, I am dyslexic with numbers. I was dyslexic mildly with reading, but my grandson in two of my grandsons in Germany, Ben and Sebastian, are both dyslexic, and Ben's daughter, Lily, she is dyslexic. Now, my son in Scotland got tested, and he's a really clever guy. He's what we used to call the boffin, because he knew everything. His favourite book was the Guinness Book of Records, and that was his life sort of thing. And they found he was dyslexic. So it does run. And the beautiful thing about it is my great-granddaughter Lily in Germany went to a special school that helps children with dyslexic, and now she's in the normal school. So there is help. But I don't think there's anything else that's... Children were all normal births. So yeah, I think that's my medical side.
Okay. And how would you like to be remembered?
I'd just like to be remembered. I don't know. As a friend, as someone that's easy to talk to. I have lots of friends out here in Canada, and they always say they know where I am because of the laugh. And I ought to tell this little end story of when I was at school, boarding school. It's kind of funny. We were doing the practice that I spoke about, the musical ride, and the grass was on a higher level, and the gardeners hadn't been, so the headmistress decided she would mow the lawn, and we'd finished it, so all the horses were resting, and we were just watching her. Well, this machine, I think it must have been a gas one, it was just running her riot. She was literally running after it, and then she came to a tree, and then she'd have to swerve around the tree, and it was all that she could keep her feet on the ground. And we laughed. Everybody laughed, but she only heard my laugh, and I was punished. She had me in front of her, and she made the whole school put me in silence. In England, it's called sending you to Coventry. And the whole school was told not to speak to me. And I was put in a room all on my own. And I thought, this is just unfair. I don't like things that are unfair. And it suddenly dawned on me, hang on, they can't speak to me, but I can speak to them. And so I went round to all those who I knew laughed at the same time and challenged them. You laugh. I can talk to you, but you can't talk to me. And I just had a sense of humour that out of disaster, or out of what could have been a really suicidal thing, really, nobody wants to speak to you, I turned it. And that's how I would like my children and grandchildren to inherit, that what is bad can be turned. It doesn't have to stay bad. You can see a humorous side of everything. So that's what I'd like to pass on. Yes. Like the funny story about the laughter, I hope they all inherit it. It is a carrier in bad times. But my grandmother had this terrific laughter, and she had false teeth. And there's two stories. One, she was walking back home with some of her friends, and they must have cracked a joke, and she laughed so loud that her teeth came out. And in the old days, you had what was called like a coal shuttle in the cellar, where the guys would come with the coal and just shoot the sack of coal. Well, it went down there. The things were open. Her friends and her had to go into the cellar and look for her teeth. And another time she was having afternoon tea out with her friends. And another time, again, she put her head back and laughed, and her teeth went into the sugar bowl. And these are real happenings that they shared. So yes, I think I got my grandmother's laugh.
Other than horseback riding, can you tell me about any sports or activities that you were involved in?
Well, the first boarding school I went to was closer to home. It was in St Anne's, and I used to win all the... I couldn't run. I wasn't a runner, and now I know why, because of the antitrypsin, in my lung. But I could do long jump and high jump, and it was the strange thing was, I never saw myself as others saw me, but in the first school I went to, I was always the leader of something. I was either the classroom leader or the games leader, and they voted it. And but I was so naughty. I was always in trouble, and being separated from the other girls, being in trouble. And I asked my parents to take me away because it made me very unhappy. I didn't understand all this, all this chastising sort of thing. And I used to write home and say, I hope you are well and happy. I am not. And so my mum told the headmistress that they were going to take me away. And she said, oh, I wish you wouldn't. She said, we really see Yvonne as a head girl. I thought, how could she say that when she's been disciplining me so much? But that's what happened. But really the second one I went to, Tunstall Hall, that was really geared with horses. There wasn't a lot of sports as such. It was all sports on horses. And because you had your own horse there, it was a full-time thing, looking after them. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I was, and definitely not a runner, definitely not. Quite like swimming. Oh, hockey. I played hockey and tennis. Yes, I did well at those. Here comes the memories. And we used to play cricket. Women playing cricket. You know, that was early days, but we did. I thought that was a bit boring. You know, you'd be stood on the perimeters for ages. But that's about it with my sports side. And I don't watch sports. You know, people say about, oh, well, my first husband took me to watch Liverpool. Big, you know, big night do at Liverpool football ground. That's supposed to be like the penultimate. And it was, I didn't understand a lot of what was going on. And they lost. Liverpool lost. That was unheard of. So my husband said, I'm not taking you again. So I presumed I was the doom.
About art, did you ever get into any sort of arts?
I have a son who is a total artist, the middle one. He's had his pictures shown in Glasgow Art Gallery. My older son can draw. My younger son he's never really established himself as it. I cannot draw. I cannot paint, I cannot draw. My middle son said it's because I don't practice. But what I draw, I think, you know, I've just remembered. I think I brought home a drawing when I was very young, say about 5 or 6. And I said to my mum, there, that's for you. And I remember her saying, well, what is it? I was so upset that she couldn't see it was her. That I think, oh, I'm no good at art. But the children are good at it. Yeah, the boys are good. Yeah.
Hey, could you tell me a little bit about someone who was a great influence on you in your life?
I think my grandmother, my mother's mother. Her name was Minnie, and that was her name, Minnie. I just knew that my grandmother loved me. I knew that I knew. It was something that when I went to stay with them, my grandfather as well, they'd bring down the bed and the mattress and they'd heat it in front of the fire and then they'd take it out. I remember seeing them, because they seemed old to me then, walking up the stairs with this big mattress, and they'd light a fire in the bedroom and they would bath me in a bath in front of the fire, as everything was cozy and warm and loving in that house for me. My mother said it wasn't for her and her mother didn't get on, but for me, my grandmother was my mainstay. And I've heard it said, if you're not sure if you are loved, remember somebody who you knew did love you. And that was a point of turning for me. I remembered how much my grandmother loved me. Yeah.
Excellent. Earlier, when we were having coffee, you discussed some of the challenges of growing up in the kind of society that you did with the money and so forth. Can you give me some commentary on that?
It's very unusual for me to talk about it because, as I was saying to you, most people, when they share their early days, their hardship, they went through hardship. They lived either on a farm or they had to be careful how the money was spent. I have no comprehension of that in my childhood. Everything was there. There was never a shortage of money. There was always the holidays. Everything was plentiful. It was just a way of life. I didn't even know there were people who were homeless. I didn't know there were poor people. I thought there were just people who lived in different situations, you know, different houses, like a block of flats. I even looked at a block of flats on the way into Liverpool and thought, gosh, they've got all those friends living together. So really it was kind of lonely. It was a lonely life, really, being... I don't think my parents knew how I really felt. I felt they were always busy. My father was very busy making money. We both had cars. We moved, as my father's business really got going, the factory was really doing well, we moved from Chadderton to Southport, which is a very classy place, or it was. And my mother was quite social. She was always having cocktail parties, and they were a member of the golf club, but I couldn't fit in. It isn't that they didn't include me, it's just that it wasn't something that I found easy to be amongst people who were talking about money or talking about where they were going or where they were. And it wasn't that I wasn't one of those kids, it was just I found it embarrassing listening, you know. And my mother used to dress me in clothes that I would never have chosen for myself, like smock dresses. And even when I went to boarding school, you were allowed to have a jumper and skirt or a dress, 2 dresses or 2 jumpers and 2 skirts. My mother got me 2 dresses, these with all the smocking. I felt as if I was standing out like a sore thumb. And my friends and that at school, they'd wear the little skirts and the little jumpers and mix and match, and I'd have to wear these 2 dresses that were really expensive, and it just wasn't who I was. And my mother never really knew who I was until her later years, and that is sad. I remember saying to her when I was younger, you know, I don't feel you love me. And she said, well, we do. We always wanted a little girl. And I approached her and said, yes, Mum, but I'm not that little girl. You tried to make me into the little girl that you wanted. I said, and it just never worked for me. And she said, well, you're right. And it just freed me. I knew then that all my years I'd been right. It was almost as if I wasn't acceptable, but I never really knew why. And I think it's very hard to explain the loneliness of a wealthy home. People don't know. You know, I look at people who've come up from a family that didn't have much to live on, all helped out, and I envy them. Because I think, well, they were a family. We were a family, but it wasn't cozy. It was only cozy when I went to my grandmother's, you know, and that felt loving. And I think if my parents were here today, they would say they did love me. But the fact was, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel that love. I felt like I was just part of the furniture, part of the scene, the wealthy scene. And it's something I never really talk about, because people think you're boasting. If you say you've been to boarding school, and they think that you're trying to, you know, boast about who you are. It wasn't a boast for me. It was something that I wished I hadn't happened. So it was hard. I found it hard to be in that scene.
Can you tell me a little bit about some goals you might have for the future?
Well, I don't know if they're goals. I feel like I'm living a lot of those now. I obviously go to church. It's a big church, but I'm in a red hat. I'm a red hat lady, which means you wear purple and you wear a big red hat, and we're all ladies who go out together. And I'm a member of 2 of those. And I'm a member of Fraser Valley Singles, which it's not a place for dating. It's a place where we're all single and we all go out for a meal, or we go to the pictures or whatever. And it's just a nice mix that we do. So life's really quite good. And where I live, there's all dances go on. I live in Pioneer Park, and there's always something there to go to. So I'm kind of living my goals. I think my main goal is to stay healthy. You know, it's a battle with this lung problem, but no, I thoroughly enjoy the life I'm living, And it's always interesting. The places we go to as Red Hat ladies, we've been to one and we all had our meal and we were all asking the waiter, you know, for the bill. And he said, oh, you don't need to worry, a man over there's just paid for you all. There were 18 of us. And he paid for the whole of the bill for us. Because we're such an expression of red, you know, that it causes people, you know, to, I think some of them think, oh, I wish my mum was doing things like that. So it's good, yeah. So I think the goal, as I say, it's, I would like to see more of the family. I'd like to see more of my great-grandchildren. That saddens me that I just don't see them. But no, I've got a lot of legacy I'm leaving, in that I've already got 9 grandchildren and nearly 6 great-grandchildren. So there's a little bit of me going on there.